All right, good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming back. If you weren't here last time, my name is Brad Bobie, and I'm the Administrator for Long Range Planning for the Department of Metropolitan Development. Welcome to the second ever session of the People's Planning Academy. Is everyone ready to talk about budget tonight? No. I promised last week was the most driest material, so we'll get more fun from here. So anyway, thanks for coming. I also want to thank again Indianapolis Neighborhood Resource Center for being our host tonight, as well as Eskenazi Health and the Central Indiana Community Foundation for financially supporting this project with us. So before we get into tonight's content, thank you for those of you who filled out the survey that give us some great feedback. There are a couple questions that some of you asked that I kind of want to cover real quickly. Several of you wanted to get much more into the weeds into zoning. I don't know who you are, but that is something that we're playing with, and that might be something that we can add on to the final class when we talk about the land use pattern. So we will get to that. A couple of questions about what happens if you miss a class. That's fine. You can come on Saturday, or you can also watch it online or on Channel 16 TV2. And so on your way out, on the table, there is a sheet of paper that looks like this. And then this gives you the topics as well as the dates for Thursday, Saturday, and when it's available online or on Channel 16. So if you miss a day, please let us know so that we can mark off that you actually reviewed the material. But there's always a way that you can make up the class. Okay? Someone asked about the outcome of participation. And so you will get a diploma. You will graduate from the academy. You'll also be invited to join the stakeholder committee for the mapping phase of the land use plan, which is the next phase, which is where we'll be working out in neighborhoods across the county, and so you'll be able to choose what areas you're most interested in. But honestly, the most important outcome, and this is kind of what I alluded to when I said maybe I have an ulterior motive in all this, is that we have a whole army of citizen planners out in the neighborhoods working to make their little piece of Marion County a stronger, better place. And so to me, that's my outcome. That's why I'm doing this. But you will get a diploma. You will be invited to the stakeholder committee. Some of you asked about history of planning from the HUD-NUT days to now. Us planners talk about the HUD-NUT days as the glory days because there are so many planners and so many activities going on. So we're working on this. I will say that we will touch on some of the darker sides of city planning that we are honestly not so proud about and that we're still trying to find ways to undo when we get to the class on inclusion. That's a piece that I will do. So we will touch on some history, and we'll try to work in some of the other history of city planning in the more modern days. So those are the questions. There's a couple others that I'll get to here in a second in the wrap-up from last week. You should have gotten a workbook on your way in. Everyone get a workbook? All right, so those are yours to keep. You can write in them, you can take them home, you can do whatever. Now this is our very first edition of that workbook. It is honestly very hot off the presses. And so I promise you there's typos, and this is something that we want to do further editions of and keep adding content to. And so periodically, or perhaps at the end of the academy, we'll give you a survey about the workbook itself so we can continue to make that improved. Now, all that I talked about last time, the budget discussion, that's in there. And so if you don't remember talking about budget, you probably want to forget talking about budgets, but it's in the first section there. The next 4 sections in the book line up with the classes here, which also line up with the bicentennial agenda values. Now, note that the guest speakers in the workbook are complementary. They're not necessarily duplicative. And so there will be things in the workbook that speakers don't cover, and there will be things that speakers talk about that are not covered in the workbook. And so you need to really learn from both the workbook and from the lecturers that we have with us. Any questions about that? All right, so real quick, just recapping what we talked about last time. Planning is like a budget. It's a framework to help make decisions in the future. Zoning is the law that regulates what can go where and how it can be built by right today. And the relationship between the two, the comprehensive plan, the land use plan, helps decision makers evaluate rezoning and variances of land use requests that come in before them. And so the plan is one of those things that's considered when someone wants to change what they can do on their property. Okay? Now, we also learned what the comprehensive plan is. And so we focused on 2 of the gears. So the blue gear there at the top, the vision and values, that's the bicentennial agenda, which we asked you to read a few pages in for this class. And so that outlines the guiding values that drive every other plan in our system. And those guiding values are making Indianapolis a healthier, more resilient, more inclusive, and more competitive place. The other piece is the land use plan, and that is really the impetus of why this academy is being held right now. There are a couple of questions about how all the pieces fit together. And so this slide is attempting to answer that. The land use plan has 2 pieces to it. The pattern book, which is the thing that's available right now for public review comment on indy.civiccomment.org. I mistyped .com last time, it's actually .org. That's available through Tuesday. That's the kind of the technical guidelines that go with the plan. And then the map is the second piece, and that's the thing that you guys will be invited to join the stakeholder committee for, and actually applying the types of neighborhoods, types of districts described in the pattern book to actual geographies in Marion County. And that map is the thing that makes the pattern book real. Okay. And so tonight, we've got 2 guest speakers that are joining us. Kim Irwin with Health by Design is going to talk about walkability. We'll have a chance for you to ask any questions you have of her. And then we'll introduce Andre Denman, who works for Indy Parks / DPW, to talk about the value of parks and open space when it comes to our community. And then we have a fun activity. We heard lots of comments about you enjoyed the activity, you wanted more activities, and so we have an activity that kind of builds on what we did last time. And so before I turn it over to Kim, any questions? All right, with that, Kim Irwin.
Hello, everyone. Hello. It's good to be with you this evening. I recognize many familiar faces and many new faces as well, so thank you for the opportunity to be here. I am Kim Irwin. I'm the Director of Health by Design. We are a coalition, a nonprofit organization that functions as a coalition, and we work here in Indianapolis and throughout the state of Indiana to ensure that our communities have neighborhoods, public spaces, and transportation infrastructure that promote physical activity and healthy living. And the topic of tonight aligns perfectly with the work that we do, so I'm happy to share a bit about what we do, and then also look forward to your questions. I'm going to say, Brad gave me a long list of things to talk about in a short amount of time, so I'm going to go quickly and we can revisit them. So we talk in our work about the intersection of the built environment and public health, with the built environment really being broken down into transportation and then land use, the exact things that you all are learning about today. And those health impacts have to do with opportunities for physical activity. They have to do with safety and keeping people who are walking and biking and riding transit, as well as people who are driving, safe. It's about air quality and other environmental health aspects. And then it's about access. And we use the term access very broadly. It can mean everything from literally, can a person get to medical care, to can they get to healthy food, can they get to a job, can they get to civic and social engagements? How do people move around in their community? And so in our work, we really talk about active living as a way of life that integrates physical activity into daily routines. It's about having communities that are walkable, that are bikeable, that are transit-oriented, that are universally acceptable, universally accessible, regardless of age, regardless of ability, regardless of income, that all people can get where they need to go, where the streets themselves are places, and where all settings in a community provide safe and easy opportunities for being active. I'm a public health professional, and our organization is based and grounded in public health, and that's the aspect I care about. But the beautiful thing about active communities and built environments that facilitate walking, biking, and transit is that there are vast benefits. So I hope you care about public health, but it's okay if you don't, right? There's hopefully something else on this list that grabs your attention, whether it's the environmental aspects, whether it's that, again, mobility and accessibility for all people, whether it's about the connection to social and civic engagement, or the economic advantages. We know that property values go up where people have sidewalks, when they're near a trail. We know that there's an attraction of businesses, of new jobs, of that kind of thing in communities that have lots of ways for people to get around. And so we, again, talk about the health of a community, but we're also from the standpoint of physical health, but we're also talking about the financial health of a community. And the good news is we're entering our 12th year in Health by Design, and we have, as I said, a coalition of partners who come from a real diversity of interests and priorities. And we might want active living communities for different reasons, but we all feel like getting there is important, and the ways in which we accomplish that are the way to do that. So, I have a few questions for you all, and I'll repeat those back for the microphone purposes. So, there's research that's really emerged in the last decade or so about how important our environments are for our health. And so we have this quote here. It says, "One number may determine how healthy you are and how long you live. It isn't your weight, your cholesterol count, or any of those numbers that your doctors look at." Who wants to guess what number we're talking about? I see a hand in the back first.
Zip code?
Zip code. Awesome. Good answer. So this one is address specifically because it gets into really essentially the finer nuances of zip code, right? Within a zip code, you could have a variety of environments, but you're exactly right. So we talk now about our zip codes being more important than our genetic codes in terms of our health outcomes. This is the wonkiest slide I have. I am going to read it to you, but it's about a really important concept that, again, has really just emerged in the last few decades, considering we've been doing public health for more than a century, right? And so it's talking about what we call social determinants of health. And those are the conditions in which people are born, grow, live, work, and age. And so essentially the places where we spend our time, where we live as children, where we grow up, where we go to school, where we worship, where we work. And the reality that those circumstances are shaped by the distribution of money, the distribution of power, and the distribution of resources at the global, national, and local levels. And I'll insert state as well. And those things are influenced by policy choices, right? So we've spent decades telling people you need to move more, and you need to eat better, and you need to not use tobacco, and you need to get clinical care, and that's how you stay healthy. And those are all true things, right? But if people don't have options for moving about in their community, if they don't have options for getting to healthy food, if they don't have options for avoiding smoke in public places, tobacco smoke, they cannot make healthy choices, right? And so we talk about making the healthy choice the easy choice. And that means that we have to give people options. We have to give them options for how they move around. We have to give them options for the places they go. We have to give them options for the type of housing they live in. And so it comes back to, again, this idea that by providing a range of options for people, whether that's transportation, again, housing, community styles, neighborhood design, that we allow people then to make a decision about what's best for them, but they're able to do that so that they can then make healthy choices for themselves. So, the problem is we've spent decades and decades and billions upon billions of dollars building things in a way that prohibits choice or limits choice, right? This is how we typically think of transportation. This may be how we think of housing, right? And yet again, we know that having different ways for moving it around in a community, having different ways for the places we go becomes incredibly important. I have a slide in here just to let you know that this, again, is grounded in scientific evidence, academic research that, again, has really accelerated over the last 20 plus years. And Active Living Research is the author of this infographic and many others that have statistics like it. And it's activelivingresearch.org. I encourage you to visit that if you're interested in digging further into the science of what I'm talking about. activelivingresearch.org. So how many of you have heard the term complete streets? Right? Okay, I'm going to talk about that a little bit more. Indianapolis has what's called a complete streets policy. And essentially, complete streets are streets that are accessible for people of all ages and abilities. They're safe to move along, and they're safe to move across. And we know how to build them. We do it in lots of ways in lots of places, but not always. And so we end up with streets that look like this, right? Where you're trying to cross lanes of traffic that are never stopping, with trying to ride a bike where there's no a shoulder, trying to walk and get your groceries in places where cars are speeding by faster than they should be going, bus stops that aren't accessible or in the middle of a ditch, where people who are walking or biking get shoved to the side or literally can't access the infrastructure they need to. Streets where this seems logical, right? So I want to just, again, get a little bit of input from you for a few minutes. I understand that you talked about complete communities last time. Do some of you remember that term? I'm going to talk about it as neighborhoods of opportunity. And so when you hear neighborhoods of opportunity, what do you think of as the characteristics of that? What are the features of a neighborhood of opportunity from your perspective? Sorry. Most things you have are there in the neighborhood, so it's nearby.
Right.
Is that fair? Okay.
I was going to say mixed use.
Mixed use, so a variety of residential and services and retail. Please.
Well, for me, I guess I would say it's designing neighborhoods or environments so that people who are marginalized are also included, so everybody has access to opportunity and progress.
Okay, great. So people who are marginalized are included in a neighborhood of opportunity and have access and opportunity. Thank you. Literally, what are some, you both spoke to that idea of mixed use. What are some of those things you want to see in your neighborhood of opportunity?
Jobs.
Jobs, right? It's always a good one. Please.
Yeah, public gathering spaces that don't, like I said, don't kick out marginalized people for being there.
Sure, public spaces that allow everyone to gather,
Right, yeah.
including those who are marginalized. Another one or two, please. Grocery stores and bank, was it? Okay, thank you.
Real big one for my family is accessibility, handicap accessible.
So accessibility.
Sidewalks, streets.
Thank you. Accessibility for people with disabilities. So having sidewalks, streets that have curb ramps and other features that allow accessibility. Okay, you guys got it. You learned. I'm confident you all came in here with a very strong baseline of knowledge, but you learned a lot last week, I'll bet too. So those things are exactly the types of things we're talking about. Having that variety of uses of the places people need to go and want to go to spend time with their neighbors, for themselves, that kind of thing. And so again, we talk about having safe, accessible, connected, and inviting communities. And as I had said, we do know how to do it. The next slide I'm going to put up is probably the most important one, and that is a slide that says intention. And so what I want to leave you with, and I think is hopefully something that's interwoven throughout this training, is that the way we've been, there's a lot of, I call it inertia around the status quo. The way we've been doing things for decades is the way it's really easy to do it, right? It's hard to do things differently. It's hard to, we all are resistant to change on some level, right? And when you have a job that you've been doing a certain way, doing it differently is difficult. Thinking differently, thinking more holistically, more inclusively can be difficult. And so it's extremely important to understand that in order to get to the communities we want to see, in order to see changes to our built environment, in order to have mixed use neighborhoods, we have to be intentional about doing that. And the planning that has happened through Plan 2020 and specifically here with the land use plan is intentional and is setting us up for a future that will allow that. I'm going to skip through a couple of slides quickly just to touch briefly on walkways. So a couple of years ago, Health by Design, in partnership with the City of Indianapolis and the Marion County Public Health Department, secured funding through the the American Planning Association, which is the National Association for Professional Planners and affiliated partners, for funding to develop the city's first pedestrian plan and to initiate some other programs, initiatives to make the city more walkable and to, again, set us up for a future that's more walkable. And so with that, again, we did the city's first pedestrian plan and really used that opportunity to set a vision for what we want to see, but also to establish a process for prioritization that was clear, data-driven, and equitable. I'm not sure what you talked about exactly last week with the budget, but you're probably well aware that we face significant constraints as a city. We went into the pedestrian plan estimating that the total walking need was $750 million. My estimate coming out of that is that it's probably nearly double that. We have much, much more even than that $750 million. And we only have historically spent about $50 million per year on all of our transportation services, about $3 million on pedestrian infrastructure. So if we're spending $3 million a year and we have well over $1 billion of need, we're never going to get there, right? And unfortunately, there is no good financial option that would get us there either, right? We have to be constructive and dedicated in how we get there. So if you want to learn more, there's a state of walkability report that's a component of that plan. The methodology for prioritization essentially looked at factors including health, safety, equity, walking comfort, walking demand, and then some other city priorities. Essentially, we layered all of that data together, got a good amount of input from the public around how we prioritize, what things are important, and then we're able to develop a prioritization matrix that shows 3 tiers of priority throughout the county. I understand if you live in an area that's the lightest blue, that might be disappointing to see. But again, we used dozens of data points and we're very thoughtful and got a lot of input around how we think about those things in terms of determining where we spend limited resources. And so that's a project that is ongoing with the city to help implement that plan and begin to use that process. We looked at project selection as well then and the types of things that factor in, and I just want to point out improving access to nearby destination, transit access, removing barriers, those kinds of things were extremely important. And then there were about 40 other recommendations within that plan that fit into programs, policies, and procedures that we're trying to develop and implement and have an ongoing working group around that. Last, just a couple of things I'll say, and I could talk about this for way more time. If you're interested, I'm happy to share, but one of the other things that we do throughout the city are walk audits, where we literally go out into neighborhoods or other areas to look at the infrastructure, how walkable it is, what's that mix of uses, and how do we look to make improvements. And so we've got a number of partners who have participated in that, some of you in the room, and are really using those findings along with some other data analysis that we're doing to really help ensure that we're creating safe, walkable environments for all people. This is an example of some safety messaging that we've had, but certainly community outreach and engagement, looking at enforcement, engineering improvements, and policy changes that will lead us there. So I've gone over already. I'm going to pause and hopefully have a few more minutes for questions, I think. So, and I saw one up here.
There was a slide that you had that had the tiers.
Uh-huh.
The tier 1 is like the most, that's the highest priority.
Mm-hmm. The darkest color blue are the areas that have the most need for walkable infrastructure. So what this map doesn't point to or doesn't account for is the current state of walkable infrastructure. This is essentially saying these are the areas that require the most walkability within the city based on all of those other factors.
Where's that available online?
So at indywalkways.org is where there's a planning tab. That's where the pedestrian plan is located. And I'm happy to, I don't know if you're doing emails, but we could send it out there as well. Right here.
I guess often while walking around, sometimes whenever like construction takes out a sidewalk, like do you guys have any like sort of temporary sidewalks that sort of create to mitigate that problem?
Sure, that's a fantastic question. So the question was about basically, do we have a way to help when get involved when construction renders an existing sidewalk inaccessible, right? When it's in the middle of construction and you can't use it. You may have touched on my biggest personal pet peeve around walkability. I will just say it's a systemic issue that has to do with the contractors and even city staff, and a history of not requiring good, that's called maintenance of traffic. So we do it for cars routinely, right? But walking, biking tends to be an afterthought. So I would always report something like that to the MAC, to the Mayor's Action Center, and happy to talk with you more, but we are continually working on that, so. Right back here.
What is your system for assessing a neighborhood when you're trying to make it walkable or safe?
So what is the system?
Yeah, what system do you use?
Sure.
Because you might make it more walkable, but the neighborhood might not be safe for people to be walking around.
Okay, sure. So the comment and the question was, what is the system we use for assessing walkability, with the recognition that making it more walkable might be in an area that's not safe for walking? Or that, just to clarify, are you saying that more people walking would make it less safe?
That the area is not.
The area is not safe for
There's
walking.
a lot of crime.
Right, exactly. So the walk audits that we do tend to focus specifically on the infrastructure, but we are also looking at behavioral aspects and other elements of the exact zone, we call it, that we're looking in. And so I think we know that more people walking, more people out and about reduces crime. It's called Eyes on the Street. I think I saw already, it's maybe touched on in the booklet. It's a very important concept and important within IMPD and other city staff who have done work around. It's called crime prevention through environmental design. And so it's obviously complicated and I'm oversimplifying it, but I think that idea of how we use our built environment, how we increase walkability as a tool for reducing crime is a really important conversation and something that is an important connection. So thank you.
Safety issue of different type. Who are you working with as far as infrastructure in neighborhoods? Like my neighborhood, the sidewalks are a hazard in and of themselves. In the streets, I walk and ride my bike every day. I ride a mountain bike in Indianapolis because you know what? The big tires and suspension are great for our permanent infrastructure. You know, I've done too many rams and blown too many tires out.
Right.
You know, because sometimes with traffic, there's nowhere to go but it's the potholes.
Right.
And are you working with somebody to help to address those issues to make our neighborhoods more accessible, healthier places to get out and ride bikes and walk?
Right. So you're raising a really important issue as well, which is that in many cases maybe, the infrastructure that we already have, so existing sidewalks are in such poor repair that they become a hazard in and of themselves, and they're not usable and safe in that way. And so that idea of, again, repair and ongoing maintenance is definitely built into all of the work we're doing. It's not about only building new sidewalks. But the approach and how you do that is a little bit different too, and so it comes into play with funding.
You
And
have some interdepartmental relationships going and working with other departments.
within the city.
Private and government.
Yes. Yeah. So we work weekly, daily with the staff in Department of Metropolitan Development and the Department of Public Works, and that's an ongoing part of the conversation. Yeah. One more? Okay, I'm gonna come back over here in the room.
You've done the assessment, you've done the planning. How is the budget established? Where does the funding come from? And the period, the turnaround for once you've done the assessment and the planning, what's the turnaround? I mean,
Right.
results, how do you get
Right.
results?
So again, you've touched on an incredibly important piece of that. I usually do offer it as, which is a regard to the budget and funding and how we actually then pay for the sidewalks once we've understood that there's a need. I usually offer a disclaimer, which I didn't, that the plan that we did, the money we received for the planning process did not have any money for infrastructure improvements itself. So part of, I don't have a good answer, is the first thing I will say. I do understand in the budget that was just approved, and I don't know the details, but that there was a dedicated line item this time for sidewalk improvement. Let me say it this way. I don't know if it's a line item. There was dedicated money planned for sidewalk improvement. So that's a step in the right direction.
Or targeted area? Or
I don't know the answer to that. I think generally. Obviously, though, it's not going to be able to do everything. So there ultimately will be a process for picking. One of the things I didn't say about Complete Streets, but that's really important, is that we are already spending millions and millions and millions of dollars on our City of Indianapolis transportation system every year. Part of the Complete Streets approach, part of what we need to do as residents is to ensure that every dollar that gets spent in the wisest way possible. So it's very easy to say, like, well, we don't have enough money to fill potholes, we shouldn't build sidewalks, right? And the Complete Streets approach says anytime you're touching a roadway, you're doing everything possible to make it safer, more accessible, more inclusive. And we have a role in holding people accountable for that. We have a role in making sure they know what the needs are. But we also have to eventually, I think, have some hard conversations about how we're paying for infrastructure and if we are going to need to eventually do something else to address the need we have. So with that, I'll stop.
All right, thank you, Kim. So random trivia, but about 100 years ago, Kim's profession of public health and my profession of city planning were the same thing. Planning actually grew out of the field of public health in New York City. New York City was facing a lot of communicable disease problems because they had tenement housing with no light and no air and all of that. And so they introduced planning, they introduced building codes to solve that, and communicable diseases disappeared. But today we don't face communicable diseases as a major threat in America. We face chronic diseases. And the workbook that you have talks a little bit about the relationship between place and how we build our cities, as well as how the health outcomes that we get from them. And so with that, I'm going to turn over to Andre Denman, who is the Principal Park Planner and Greenways Manager for DPW/Indy Parks.
He's also the gift that keeps on giving.
So, I wanted to do something really quick, and I'm going to have you do something while I try to do this, because I was sitting over there freezing, so everybody get up and hug somebody. I'm not playing, get up and hug somebody.
Right here.
right, good. Everybody warm up? All right, so there's a little bit of text missing. It actually says Parks and Green Space, the gift that keeps on giving. First of all, commend you for coming out tonight. My plan is to get done. I have a lot of slides. You've asked someone who likes to talk about parks to talk about parks. So, but my plan is to get you home and myself in time to watch Scandal. So that's the way this is going to go. So again, I'm the principal park planner and Greenways manager for the city. Parks planning, I look at short range and long range planning, so we'll talk about a little bit of that tonight. And actually, I report to 2 departments, so it'll make sense hopefully a little later. And so this map shows you, hopefully you can see in green, these are all your parks in the city. And so just to give you an idea of how all-encompassing that is, there's actually over 11,000 acres, about 211 parks. And you can see the laundry list of everything that you have in your park system, over 1,000 annual programs. And I used to make the joke at the end, and a partridge in a pear tree, because that's a list. That is what you have. You're paying tax dollars for, okay? And so that's your park. And so how did we get here is your question, and I'm sure you want to know how did we get here. You have such great questions. And so a little bit of history. Alexander Ralston, the gentleman who created, I guess, the Mile Square downtown. Once that's created, they realized, sort of like when you move into a new house, there was no green space. He didn't, other than Monument Circle, there was no parks planned for. Of course, he sat a town down in the middle of farmland, so it was a lot of green space around it. And so, sort of like when you move in a house and you realize you don't have enough closets or storage, that's kind of what parks are. We forget about them until after everything's done. And so, what happened, just to let you know how iconic that is, you can see the Alexander Hotel is named after him. It also has that iconography, I guess that's the word, is made after that square. And also Ralston's Draft House in the background, I hope you can see it a little bit, also pulls from that. So just to let you know, there's some history going on. And so after that, the city kind of realized, and actually a co-worker of mine, Tina Jones, once I put up this picture, she could probably do more justice talking about the person I'm going to talk about here in a minute. So Tina, restrain yourself. But the city actually had a success of planners. They started looking at different things. Now there's one gentleman whose picture is not up here, and it's because I could not find a picture of him. But in between it, Joseph Earnshaw actually was the first planner after Ralston to proposed doing a string of parks and the greenways along the streams. And then they hired John C. Olmsted, that's the relative or stepson of Olmsted, who designed Central Park, to look at a plan for the city. And then George Kessler, which created the Kessler Park and Boulevard system. And then each plan just built on each other. Lawrence Sheridan's plan, and I'll show you a picture of at least 2 of these next. And so you can see at the top, there's the Ralston plan. And it was very small, again, center downtown, but on the left is Kessler's plan, which expanded on that. And then Lawrence Sheridan's plan expanded on that even more, all the way to the end of the county. And so parks are actually at the heart of how the city planned to grow and expand when it started. And so that's why I said it's the gift that keeps on giving. It's because parks were actually thought about when this city was trying to originally expand and become great. And so Brad gave me a laundry list of things to talk about. The purpose for parks, I just Googled this just to be funny. Park is an area of, a park is an area of natural and semi-natural planet space set aside for human enjoyment and recreation. So that's the Google answer of what's the purpose of a park. And so really, there's a slogan, all politics is local. What's important to someone on one side of town might not be important to you because it's where you are. And so parks are like that. All parks are local. Everything, a purpose for a park is what it means to you. What do you want? What do you need? What do you want for your community, your place? And so, I could go deep talking about Maslow's hierarchy of needs and everything of that nature, but the slogan at the bottom pretty much sums it up. Our purpose is creating places and experiences that inspire, that come straight from our vision and our plan. And so whatever it is you want the purpose for your park to be, hopefully it's something, it's a place, an experience that you want to inspire you. And so many people have purpose for parks. It could be recreation, it could be transportation. It could be socialization, not socialism, socialization. Dog parks are more about the owners of the dogs hanging out than just the dogs hanging out. Okay, there's a social aspect to it. You might go to parks just for nature, to see the beauty of nature. You may go to parks for clean air and clean water. Okay, you may go to a park for a festival or something of that nature. But whatever it is, the reason you went there, whatever the reason, is because something that was created that inspired you to do that thing. Okay? And so again, these parks, the purpose of parks is created to inspire you to do something. So again, here's your picture of all your parks. And there are different classifications for parks. So I'm gonna run through this pretty quickly. Regional, community, neighborhood, mini. A regional park would be something that's 50 acres or more that can draw from anywhere all over the county. You think of an Eagle Creek or a Garfield or a Riverside, people will travel even outside the county for those parks. A community park is any park that has a community center. It's usually about 25 acres. Washington Park and Perry are examples. Neighborhood parks, which are the backbone of our system. We have more neighborhood parks than anything else. They're about 5 to 10 acres and above. You think of an Arsenal or a Bluff right in your neighborhood. Mini parks, or some people call them pocket parks. Those are less than 5 acres, but they can also be as small as a house lot. And honestly, the smaller the park, the more it is to maintain. You would think it's more on average cost to maintain a mini park. There's also sports complexes, golf courses, natural resource areas. Sometimes we call those just areas where we're lane banking them for now, just passive recreational areas. Special use, like our dog parks or town-run mountain bike or Indy Urban Acres. Historical monuments, Browns Corner and Taggart, and then of course our Greenways. So that talks to you about classifications. So there are other parks in our system in the city, not just Indy parks, and I wanted to run through those. KIB does an awesome job of creating what they call Project Green Spaces. You have to apply for this for your neighborhood. For before and after, they have turned some eyesores into gyms. So there's an opportunity again. We don't own them, but these are green spaces that help inspire people in their community. Also, the Central Indiana Land Trust, or CILT, they have parks and land in the city. You can get on their website and you can see some that are open to the public, some that have minor access, and then some that don't at all. I have a picture here. They're actually privately owned parks, but they're open to the public. These are parks near downtown, near Alabama. They have playgrounds, they have a shelter, they have drinking fountains, and so Indy Parks is not the only people that own parks. I'm just trying to show you that there are other ways to provide green space in the city of Indianapolis. Also, HOA common areas. Now, this is where it gets kind of tricky, because sometimes an HOA might not want anyone from outside that community to come and use their park. Again, if that's there, Indy Parks may or may not be providing a park in that area because there's green space that's already available. So just wanted you to know about that. So you can see here, there's a tennis court, a basketball court on the right. They got a swimming pool, a playground, and a partridge in a pear tree. Another way that we get land, this is off of I-74. This is actually land that was created in a subdivision by the developer at the time. They created a park with a walking trail, a parking lot. There's a little playground you can see off to the left. And just for right now, we're keeping that grass on the inside of that, just native prairie. It's right off of I-74 in Franklin. But that's another way that parks come to our department. Okay? Now, this is something I threw in just because I wanted to push your thinking. Public schools, this is an area I'm going to show you where we have a deficit. We just don't have any parks. There's a public school. Taxpayers are paying for this public school to be open. Okay? And so you can see on this property, there's an opportunity for basketball, 2 playgrounds, and what could that parking lot become when the school's not available? How could that provide recreational use for a community that is solely in need of it? I mean, they really need it. Basketball, well, there's some there too. Well, you can't see them, but they're there. And so, again, your taxpayers are already paying for this space. What could it become when the school's not being in use? And then this is one of my favorites. On the right is Green Park, and on the left is, I had to turn the slide so it's not orientated the way it actually is. is Pleasant Run Elementary School. So what you see is on the right, you have a playground, there's a small spray ground off of that parking lot, there's 4 tennis courts, there's a walking trail, and a beautiful open space. But to the left, right next door, is another open space of soccer fields and also a playground and basketball courts. Both spaces that could be open to the public. So why do you have 2 playgrounds when the taxpayers are paying for it? Again, how can we work together to figure out, to create and make all the needs happen and not double tax? Hey, I should have probably said that. But, you know, we're doing double duty, okay? So again, something for you to think about it in this process.
Can people not use those, I'm sorry, can people not use those playgrounds when school's not in session, like in the summer? Can't they go, I mean.
They can, yes. I thought you would, yeah. They are available, but in some schools, they have fences around their playgrounds, and it depends on the principal. The principal can decide if they're gonna open those playgrounds to the public when school's not in. So again, that's another discussion for another time, but I just wanted to get your brain thinking. Trends in parks, we've all seen the High Line on the left there, what it used to be. We've all seen, which inspired the Bloomberg or 606 in Chicago, which inspired the Cultural Trail, which we know about, and also the Cultural Trail inspired the Green Loop, which is coming in Portland. And so these are trends that are in parks, connectivity, just doing it different ways. All of that is really nothing more than a greenway in a park, okay, how we develop it. Other trends, you've probably heard about Millennium Park, and if you've not been to Millennium Park, first of all, I'd say what's wrong with you being this close to Chicago, that you've never went and seen this thing, but it's incredible. So you have the Bean, that's art, it's a gathering space that has a nice band shell. When I say nice, it's over the top. For yoga and performances, there's a nice garden that you can walk through. There's on the bottom left what basically is a water spray ground, an interactive spray ground, okay? Then you go across the Snake Bridge, over to the new Maggie Daly Playground, which is another water spray ground and a playground. All that is what Tarkington Park wants to become. Okay, so all these trends are the same thing. You know, Millennium Park is one thing, Tarkington one day will be the next, same thing. Other trends, development on waterfronts. You can see there on the left, people are putting parks and playgrounds and skate parks under highways. That's the picture in the middle. There's also parks, in the middle picture on the top, bottom, park over a highway. That's in Dallas. People are finding ways to bring green space wherever they can get it. On the top right, this is actually about to take place in New York. Somehow, some way, they lost the whole train station underground, and somebody just found it, and now they're going to develop a park underground. Again, because people want green space so badly, they'll even put it underground to provide the recreational space to inspire someone. And then at the bottom, that's just a space in Philadelphia that's actually, if I were able to turn the camera around, is where Rocky ran up the steps in Philadelphia. But this playground, this temporary pop-up space is in between 8 lanes of traffic that go around it. So people are putting parks in the middle of traffic because they want to create parks and space. And so that leads me to another trend, parklets. That's one of the big things that's going on right now. Taking away lanes of traffic, not just with the Cultural Trail, but also, you've probably seen them on the Circle. Parking day was temporary, but these parklets are here to stay. They're coming to become permanent. And so as you think about spaces, what makes a great place in a park, don't just think of a park by itself. A park can only do so much. It creates recreation, but it needs something. A trail needs somewhere to go to. A park needs something, people to come to it, okay? So when you're thinking of making places, the power of 10, the more things you can program in and put in the space, not just a park, but a park with a playground, a spray ground, a cafe, that's what you're seeing in Tarkington. Trails are great, but if they don't go anywhere to anything, they don't connect to something, it's kind of a waste. So when you're doing whatever exercises you're thinking about, how many things can you get developed will actually make the place more successful, or make the park, or make that more successful? I don't know how well you can see this operating budget. Expenses, again, how are you going to make it happen? Brad probably made you depressed last week talking about the city's budget and taxes. Indy Parks, about 2009, if you can see those numbers, You can see a little thing, the numbers were a little bit higher, but two things happened. There was a recession, and then property tax caps hit, and Parks gets about 50% of its operating budget from property taxes. So when we put the caps on, that basically slashed our budget in half. And so, and then there were some changes in the way that's why I'm in DPW, but doing work for Parks, some operational changes. And so I want to just go to this last slide here. You can see on the far right, our budget is about $30 million. The last line, $4 million to do capital improvements. For a system as big as we have, we should be probably spending about anywhere from $15 to $20 million for capital improvements, okay? And so this is the only probably controversial thing I'm going to say here tonight, and I know we're recording, so I'm going to be very careful in how I say it. And just to give you an idea, there is an awesome location here in the city. It's a museum where many people might take their children. I've taken my children just to give you an idea of where this place might be. That budget for that one building is $32.9 million. And so think about that. One location, which is a great location, and I'm not speaking against them, they do great things in our city. $32.9 million budget for one building, but the parks budget is only $30 million for the 14th largest city in the United States. Think about it. So the other ways we get park financing is our Parks Foundation raises funds for us. Indiana Department of Natural Resources, we get grants from them. Greenways Foundation, and I just put the big three of foundation groups that we work with: Eagle Creek, the Friends of Garfield Park, and the Friends of Holiday Park. We would not be able to do anything without all of these and many more giving money to our system. So I'm running out of time, and hopefully I can do this quickly. So where should we be looking to add parks? So there's a thing that comes out every year from the Trust for Public Lands called Park Score, and they have an incredible methodology and matrix that sometimes is good and sometimes is not. Just to let you know, of the top 100 cities in the country, Indianapolis is ranked 100 at the bottom. Okay, so much of that is based on not just park land, but also because of our budget. So, can't get it to what I want to use in red. So in red are areas where basically there's a need for parks, okay? And so when we're talking about ideas of creating these places, these spaces, this is one tool you can use to basically look at where we should add parks. And so piggybacking off of Kim, there's an area here that shows health. So you can click on health and you see the purple areas. Those are areas where you may want to focus, because if there's a health deficit, there's probably a deficit of parkland. So those are areas. And then they don't have it on here, but I did look at it, and some of these areas are in areas where there's high crime. And so no parks, no hope, no inspiration, and health deficit. So I just wanted to show you that. You can pull this up, parkscore.com. Yes, ma'am.
How do you determine what parks to improve that are existing parks? I live across from Grand Martin Park, and there's been nothing done in that park for a long time. And so I'm just wondering, how does a park of that size, that has trails that lead to White River, that has that connectivity already, get to have a voice like Tarkington currently has?
We have to juggle a lot of different things with $4 million to do capital improvements, and so some of it is if a group or someone brings dollars to the table to, I guess, use a better word, push the issue or help us justify spending some of that $4 million to build whatever. A playground usually costs between, on the small side, $100,000 to a large playground like the one you see at Tarkington, almost $1 million. And so that's not going to happen if we don't have other funding to bring with it. Because if we spend $1 to $3 million of our budget on one site, then if a roof blows off somewhere else, or if there's an emergency, or if a pool gets damaged, we just have to juggle. And so actually, There's a lot of people looking at Grand Martin Park, formerly Fall Creek and 16th, to make some improvements in that park, because there's a lot more focus going in the downtown area, and so we may be able to announce something pretty soon about that area. But again, with 200 parks, I live in a house with just me and my wife and 2 daughters. I can't make everybody happy in that house with just 2 people. So I know trying to make 200 parks and 900,000 people happy, somebody's not going to be happy. So again, that's why I brought up the funding issue, because everybody wants a Tarkenton. Everybody wants something like Tarkenton. I'm not going to say a Tarkenton. They want their park to be nice too, because again, all politics is local. Each park is precious to either I used to live in that neighborhood, or I want my community to be just as nice as what I see somewhere else. And so I understand. So thank you for that question. Yes?
And you're saying that someone brought additional funds to the table for Target, along funding.
Okay. What happened in that case, actually what we did was, as part of a new master plan for the park, we pushed the vision. Normally when we do a park master plan, maybe $1 million or $2 million. That master plan for Tarkenton was like a $10 to $15 million vision, which again is way more than we could afford with our budget. So we pushed, the community actually pushed the envelope in the vision. And so that vision brought people to the table that wanted to give money to the vision that was shown. And so then the city was able to also move dollars from other places, like there were some TIF dollars that came to the table. There were some dollars that were raised through the Indianapolis Parks Foundation that were allocated for it as well. And then the community itself raised some money for that cafe that's there now. They raised almost $1 million for that. So again, it started with the vision though. When we went out to the community and asked, what would you like to see in your park? They came with a very tall vision that actually brought funding, because somebody said, I like this vision. Yes.
Yeah, speaking of the TIF financing, and I live here in Bartlett, Tarkington.
Okay.
And so we were explained through several different public meetings how that worked. And when you said that that was their vision, is this something that you see going forward in the future that you can present? For instance, Federal Express just announced that they're going to be building this huge multi-million-dollar complex down in Greenwood. So is that something that can be, they can take and look at that as a TIF district that can supplement, like some of the parks down on the south side aren't getting the attention that maybe they're getting elsewhere, like on the north side? And is that part of a sort of a policy vision that you foresee in the future, continuing beyond what Tarkington Park was?
I can't say the future, but I think it's the way we're going to have to start thinking about how we finance our parks, because again, we've only $3.5 to $4 million to make dreams come true in every neighborhood. We're going to have to think of these different ways. Again, those choices are outside of my ability to grasp, meaning to make them happen. But I'm in the public pushing the envelope with the master plans so that I can say this is what the public wants. Now, you spoke about Greenwood and FedEx. I don't think we can TIF Greenwood. So. But I get your meaning. Yes, again, TIFs are agreed to by communities, and again, that's out of my but I hope that answers your question a little bit. Yeah. I foresee this is the way we're going to go unless something else changes.
Thank you.
I have like 18 more slides and I'm not going to get to them. So I'll just say, if you go online and look for the Greenways Master Plan and the Indy Parks Comprehensive Plan, it outlines the vision for the next 5 to 10 years and for Greenways and for parks. And I would also say, just remember this, great parks equal great city. You can't have a great city without great parks. All right. So before I go, any questions?
So they mentioned the transportation budget was about $50 million. Yours was about $30 million, and the one museum was about also $30 million.
Mm-hmm.
So how big is the whole city budget?
That's a great question. $1 billion, 1.1 billion? Yeah, 1.1 billion.
Okay.
Yes. And again, the budget I was talking about from the museum, again, I don't know where they get their funding from, but a lot of that is from revenue. I'm sure they write grants. I don't know if the city gives them any money, but again, it's one building is, for their budget is more than what the whole park system is. It should not be for a city this size. Yes, sir. His question was, are there some things going on at the park at Riverside? We actually, about a month ago, all of this year, we've been going through a master planning process similar to what I talked about for Tarkenton for Riverside Park. And so there is a definite, incredible vision that's coming out for Riverside Park. We actually took a group of residents up to Millennium so that they could see what Millennium has done for that city. And so they came back with some grand vision. And so that master plan will be going to the Parks Board this month, and then the MDC next month, and then the administration will start looking for different ways to start funding that incredible vision for Riverside. But yes, I believe major things are coming from Riverside, and it came not just from the planners, but it came from a group of people just from the community and stakeholders. Yes, ma'am. No, there was never any plan to sell any land for the parks. Now, that does not mean we may not partner with Marion somehow, possibly, because they have expressed some need for some things. But again, they were at the table when we were doing all the planning, and they had an opportunity to speak up on their needs. So no, there's no plans to sell or give away. Let me be very clear. There are no plans on my watch to sell or give away any green space. Okay.
Are private parks in the comprehensive plan?
Private parks are not called out in our comprehensive plan. Again, I can only oversee or plan for what I have.
How do you find the private parks?
Like I just did, probably just driving around. I just see things. I don't have a list or a GIS file with private parks. I've been trying to get those so that we can put them in our GIS maps. That might be something that Brad can find an intern to do.
I have no money.
That'd be a good, a miracle project.
Thank you.
All right, for the final 20 minutes or so, we have an activity. We heard from the survey that you guys want more activities, and so we're going to try to do one for every session. And so, Jess?
All right, I promise I won't make you do 6 of this exact same one, but we are going to try to mix it up a little bit tonight. So everyone should have gotten a big board, a bag of land uses, and some pieces of string, right? So find your piece of string. That is walking distance, right? And so the goal here is to make a walkable community. So as you're working through this game with your table, think about that. So think about what features make a healthy city, what features make a walkable community. Can you design a community that promotes active living? As you work, think about the principles from last week's game as well. So think about how population and businesses and amenities are all connected. And think about the residents of your communities. Will they be able to walk to work? Will they be able to walk to school? Will the school children be able to walk to the park afterward? Think about all of those things as you design your board. As Brad mentioned, you'll have about 20 minutes. I'm going to put a slide up that has every single piece. This time you have one piece for every square on your board. You can only put one piece on a parcel. Okay? So if you have any other questions, just raise your hand and one of us will come around and try to help you out.